Hello, story lovers. Welcome to Suzy Space, your home for folktales that inspire, teach, and entertain. Ready? Let's begin.
The story began when Timmy was just 3 years old. One stormy evening, her father, Tayo, barged into their small home, his face unreadable. Without a word, he snatched Timmy from her mother's arms. Her mother, Tiffany, screamed and fought, but Tayo's grip was unrelenting.
"She's my daughter," he growled.
"You'll never see her again." Before Tiffany could stop him, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness with Timmy crying in his arms. Timmy had no idea what was happening. All she knew was that she was leaving everything behind. Tayo didn't raise her himself. Instead, he handed her over to his mother, Mama Ah-yo-me-dey, a bitter woman who had nothing but resentment in her heart. From the moment Timmy arrived, Mama Ah-yo-me-dey made it clear that she was unwanted. "You eat too much," she would snap. "You're nothing but a burden." She never hugged her, never spoke kindly to her. If Timmy made the smallest mistake, she was met with slaps and insults. Even as a child, she felt the deep, unbearable weight of rejection. Tayo didn't live with them, but he visited often. And every time he did, he made Timmy's life worse. At first, it was the usual beatings. He would yell at her over the smallest things, his anger quick to explode into violence. But then, things changed. He began acting differently. He started bringing her gifts, new clothes, pretty shoes, even sweets. "You see," he said one day, handing her a beautiful dress. "I'm not so bad, am I?" Timmy hesitated. Her father had never been kind to her before. But as the days passed, he continued spoiling her, praising her, treating her as if she was special. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, wanted. Slowly, her guard fell. That was when the nightmare truly began. Tayo continued to visit, each time carrying more gifts, more sweet words, more false kindness. He spoke gently to her, asking about her day, listening as if he cared. At first, Timmy was confused, hesitant. But soon, she started to trust him. She wanted to believe that he had changed, that maybe he truly cared about her now. Mama Ah-yo-me-dey encouraged this, always nodding approvingly whenever Timmy responded to her father's attention. "Your father is a good man," she would say. "You should be grateful." One night, after showering her with gifts, Tayo stayed later than usual. Mama Ah-yo-me-dey had gone to bed early, leaving them alone in the dimly lit sitting room. Tayo leaned in closer, his voice soft and warm. "You know, Timmy," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "I've missed you. I want to make things right between us." Timmy looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. This was new, different. A part of her wanted to pull away, but another part, a desperate, longing part, wanted to believe him. I miss you too," she said hesitantly. A slow smile spread across his face, and he reached into his bag, pulling out an even more expensive dress than before. It was the prettiest thing Timmy had ever seen, the fabric soft, the color perfect. "Try it on," he urged. "I want to see how beautiful you look." Timmy hesitated, but the warmth in his voice, the way he looked at her with what seemed like fatherly pride, made her obey. She took the dress and slipped into another room to change. When she stepped back out, his expression darkened slightly, but the smile remained. "You look perfect," he murmured. "Just like your mother." Something in the way he said it made her shiver. But before she could react, he pulled her into a hug. It lasted too long. That night marked the beginning of a new horror. Tayo became a regular presence in her life, but the warmth was gone. He no longer needed to pretend. Each visit became worse than the last, and soon, he was no longer coming alone. He started bringing men with him. Men who did not look at her like a child, men who were cruel, who did things that left her body broken and her spirit shattered. She tried to fight. At first, she screamed, kicked, begged. But every time, Tayo would punish her severely. One time, when she refused to obey one of the men, he locked her in a dark room for 2 days with no food. Mama Ah-yo-me-dey did nothing to stop it. She turned a blind eye, pretending as if nothing was happening. If Timi ever cried in front of her, she would scoff and say, "You should be thankful. Do you know how many girls would kill to have a father who provides for them?" Timi stopped crying after that. She felt trapped, suffocated by pain and shame. There was no way out. Every time Tayo came, her heart filled with dread. The men were never the same, but their cruelty was. She wanted to die. She thought about it often.
But she was too scared to take that step.
And then one day, she ate something that changed everything. Mama Ah-yo-me-dey had bought groundnut paste from the market, spreading it generously on bread before handing it to her, even though she knew Timi was allergic to nuts. But Mama Ah-yo-me-dey was cruel and just cannot see the sight of her. Timi's stomach was empty. She hadn't eaten properly in days. She didn't think twice before taking a bite. Almost immediately, her throat began to swell. Her chest tightened, and she gasped for air. Her skin erupted in hives, and her vision blurred. She clawed at her neck, trying to breathe, but nothing was working. Mama Ah-yo-me-dey watched her, frowning. "What's wrong with you now?" she muttered. Timi couldn't answer. She collapsed to the floor, wheezing, struggling. For a long moment, Mama Ah-yo-me-dey simply stood there, watching. Then, finally, she sighed and called for help. A neighbor rushed in, saw Timi convulsing, and immediately understood what was happening. "She's allergic to nuts," the neighbor shouted. "We need to get her to a hospital." She scooped Timi into her arms and ran out, ignoring Mama Ah-yo-me-dey's protests. The older woman seemed more annoyed than concerned, mumbling under her breath about how much trouble the girl was. Lying in a hospital bed, Timi felt weak, barely able to keep her eyes open. The neighbor sat beside her, rubbing her back gently. "Whenever you're ready to talk, I'll listen," she whispered. But Tayo was furious when he found out someone had helped. "You need to mind your business," he told the neighbor, his voice dripping with warning. "Or you'll regret it." Timi heard him say it, and for the first time, she felt something other than fear. She felt determination. If she stayed, she would die. One way or another, Tayo would kill her. She had to escape. She had to find her mother. Timi lay awake in her hospital bed, waiting for the right moment. She had one chance, and she couldn't afford to waste it. The moment the nurse left the room, she reached for the phone beside her bed, her hands trembling as she dialed the only number she had memorized. The line rang once.
Twice.
Her heart pounded against her ribs. Then a voice answered. "Hello." Timi gasped softly, her throat tightening. It had been years, but she recognized that voice instantly. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was silence on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Timi?" Tiffany's voice cracked. "Timi, is that you?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes, Mama. It's me. My baby," Tiffany sobbed. "Where are you? Tell me where you are." Timi glanced at the door, afraid someone would walk in and take the phone away. "Mama, please come. If you don't, you will only hear about my death." Tiffany's breathing turned ragged.
"No, don't say that."
"Tell me where you are right now." "I'm in the hospital," Timi whispered, "but I don't have much time. Please hurry." Before Tiffany could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Panic surged through Timi's veins. "I have to go," she hissed before hanging up. She shoved the phone back onto the table just as the nurse walked in. The woman eyed her suspiciously, but said nothing. Timi turned her face away, biting her lip to keep from crying. For the first time in years, she had hope. Her mother was coming. She just had to survive long enough to see her. Timi woke up in the hospital, her body aching as if she had been hit by a truck. Her throat burned, and her head pounded with every small movement. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, making her stomach churn. A soft murmur beside her made her turn slightly. It was the neighbor, the woman who had saved her life. She sat in a plastic chair, her hands clasped together, her eyes filled with worry. "You're awake," the woman said softly, leaning forward. "How do you feel?" Timi tried to speak, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "Hurts." "I know, my dear," the neighbor said gently. "You had a terrible allergic reaction. But you're safe now." "Safe?" Timmy's chest tightened at the word. She wasn't safe. Not as long as Tayo was still out there. Not as long as Mama Ah-yo-me-dey still supported him. Panic clawed at her chest. I have to leave, she rasped, trying to push herself up. Her limbs felt like lead. Sure, the neighbor soothed, gently pressing her back onto the bed. You need to rest. You almost didn't make it. Timmy shook her head weakly, tears brimming in her eyes. He'll find me. The neighbor's expression darkened.
Who?
Timmy swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. Tayo. The woman exhaled sharply, as if she had been expecting this answer. I won't let him take you again, she said firmly. You have to trust me.
Trust.
A word that felt foreign to Timmy. But as she stared at the woman's kind eyes, she wanted, desperately, to believe her. A knock on the hospital door made both of them freeze. Timmy's breath hitched, her body stiffening. Was it him? Had he already found her? The neighbor stood up cautiously and walked to the door, cracking it open just enough to see who was on the other side. Timmy could barely breathe as she watched. The neighbor's face softened with relief, and she pulled the door open wider. A woman stepped inside. Timmy's eyes widened. Her heart stopped. It was her mother. Tears blurred Timmy's vision as she stared at the woman she had longed for all these years. Tiffany's face was worn with worry, her hands trembling as she reached out. Timmy, she breathed, her voice breaking. My baby. A sob tore from Timmy's throat as she tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Her mother rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her, holding her like she would never let go. I'm here now, Tiffany whispered, rocking her gently. I'll never leave you again. Timmy clung to her, sobbing uncontrollably. She had waited for this moment for so long, had dreamed of it on the darkest nights. And now her mother was here. But deep inside, fear still lurked, because she knew this wasn't over. Tayo would come looking for her, and this time she had to be ready. Tiffany held Timmy close, her body trembling with emotions she couldn't contain. She stroked her daughter's hair, whispering words of comfort. You're safe, my love. You're safe now. But even as she said the words, she knew it wasn't entirely true. She had seen the look in Timmy's eyes, the fear that hadn't left her, the way her hands gripped Tiffany's clothing as though she would disappear again. Timmy, sobbing and trembling, clung to her mother as if letting go would send her back into the nightmare she had just escaped. Between ragged breaths, she told Tiffany everything, how her father had started taking advantage of her, how he forced himself on her night after night, how it didn't stop there, how he began bringing other men who treated her like she was nothing, like she was not even human. Her voice broke as she described the punishments, the days of starvation, the isolation, the pain. She whispered about the bread with the peanut paste, how she had eaten it not out of hunger, but because she wanted it to end. She had wanted to disappear, to escape the guilt, the shame that clung to her like a second skin. Tiffany gasped, her heart shattering at the words spilling from her daughter's lips. Mrs. Aggie, who had been listening silently, clenched her fists. Her eyes burned with rage. That monster. She seethed, but Tiffany barely heard her. Her mind had already drifted, back to a time when she, too, had fallen into Tayo's trap. She had been young when she first met Tayo, naive, hopeful, believing in love. He was charming, the kind of man who spoke with a quiet confidence that made her feel safe. At first, he was everything she had ever dreamed of. He showered her with gifts, expensive dresses, jewelry, perfumes that smelled like wealth. It was overwhelming, intoxicating. Whenever she hesitated, he would say, "A queen deserves to be treated like one." And she had believed him. Then slowly, the gifts came with expectations. It started subtly, him making decisions for her, picking out what she should wear, who she should talk to. If she disagreed, he would smile and say, I know what's best for you. Soon, the love that once felt warm became suffocating. One evening, he took her to a high-end restaurant, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. Over candlelight, he leaned forward and whispered, I own you, Tiffany. She laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But his eyes, dark and unblinking, told her otherwise. From that night, the mask began to slip. He controlled her completely, telling her what to do, where to go, how to think. If she resisted, he would remind her of all he had done for her, how she owed him. And when words weren't enough, his hands did the talking. By the time she realized she was pregnant, it was too late. She had been terrified to tell him, but when she finally did, his reaction was cold, cruel. "You think I want a child? A burden?" he had sneered. Tiffany had pleaded, hoping that somewhere beneath the cruelty was the man she had once loved. But Tio only laughed before tossing a wad of cash at her feet. "Get rid of it," he ordered. And then he was gone. Alone and abandoned, Tiffany had kept the child, vowing to raise her with love. But now, as she looked at her broken, shattered daughter, she realized the nightmare had only continued through Timi. Her fists tightened. She had failed to protect herself. But she would not fail to protect Timi. Never again. The neighbor watched silently, her eyes filled with understanding. "We need to leave this place," she finally said. "Teo will come. He always does." Tiffany nodded, her mind racing. "I know. But where can we go?" "I have a friend in another town. She runs a shelter for women in danger. You'll be safe there," the neighbor offered. Timmy's breath caught. "Will he find us?" The neighbor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Not if we move quickly." Tiffany didn't hesitate. "Then we leave now." The nurse entered then, frowning.
She's still weak.
"She needs rest before she can go anywhere." Tiffany clenched her fists. Time wasn't on their side. "She can rest later. Right now, we have to leave." The nurse sighed but nodded. "I'll arrange for an early discharge. But be careful." That night, under the cover of darkness, the three of them slipped out of the hospital, hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. Every shadow felt like a threat, every distant voice like a warning. As they approached the waiting car, Timi looked back one last time. Her old life, the one filled with pain and terror, was behind her. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. But she also knew Teo wouldn't stop searching. He would come for her. And next time, she wouldn't be so helpless. The drive was long and silent, the weight of their fear pressing down on them like a heavy fog. The neighbor drove, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror as if expecting Teo's car to appear at any moment. Tiffany held Timmy's hand, squeezing it every now and then, silently reassuring her that she wasn't alone. Timi, still weak, leaned against her mother's shoulder, exhaustion pulling her into a light sleep. The car finally pulled into a small compound hidden behind tall trees. The neighbor turned off the engine and exhaled. "We're here." Tiffany gently shook Timi awake. "We've arrived, baby." Timi blinked up at the house, her heart pounding. It was modest, with faded blue walls and a small porch. It didn't look like much, but to her it was hope. A chance at a new life. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She was tall, her frame strong, her expression unreadable. But her eyes softened when she saw them. "You must be Tiffany," she said, her voice firm but kind. "I'm Ada. You'll be safe here." Tiffany nodded, unable to hold back the tears. "Thank you." Ada led them inside. The house smelled of soap and warm food, a comforting contrast to the cold fear they had left behind. Timi hesitated at the doorway, her hands clutching Tiffany's dress. Ada knelt before her, her gaze steady. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Timi." Timi wanted to believe her. She really did. But she knew better than anyone. Monsters didn't just disappear. And Tayo wasn't done with her yet. Timi sat on the small bed Ada had provided for her, her arms wrapped around her knees. The room was warm, safe, but she still felt the weight of fear pressing down on her chest. She could hear her mother and Ada talking in the next room, their voices hushed but urgent. "We can't stay here forever," Tiffany was saying. "He will come looking." Ada's voice was calm but firm. "I know, but I have connections. There are people who can help you disappear completely." Timmy's heart clenched at the thought. Disappear? She had dreamed of escaping, of being free from Tayo's grasp, but the idea of running forever, of never having a place to call home, made her stomach turn. "We need to be smart about this," Ada continued. "He has money influence. But I have ways of keeping you hidden." Tiffany's voice wavered. "I just want her to be safe." "She will be," Ada promised. "But we have to move quickly." Timi closed her eyes, her breath shaky. She knew Tae-yo wouldn't let her go so easily. She had seen the way he looked at her, the way he claimed her like she was his possession. He would never stop searching. A knock at the door made her jump. Her heart pounded as she looked toward the sound. Ada moved swiftly, pressing a finger to her lips before glancing out the window. Her face hardened. Tiffany's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it him?" Ada didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped toward the door and pulled a small knife from the drawer nearby. "Stay here," she instructed. Timmy's breathing was shallow as she watched Ada disappear into the hallway. The tension in the air was suffocating. Then, the front door creaked open. A deep voice echoed through the house. "I know she's here." Timmy's blood ran cold. Tae-yo had found them. Ada stood firm, gripping the knife in her hand. Her voice was steady as she spoke. "You're trespassing." Tae-yo's dark eyes gleamed with something unreadable. "I came to take what's mine." Tiffany appeared behind Ada, her face pale but defiant.
"She's not yours," she spat.
"You lost that right a long time ago." Tae-yo smirked, stepping closer. "You really think you can keep her for me?" Ada didn't move. "Leave now." Timi pressed her back against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Tae-yo's gaze flickered toward the hallway. "Timi," he called, his voice sickly sweet. "Come out now and I won't hurt them." Timi clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wouldn't go. She wouldn't let him win. Ada took a slow step forward. "She's not going anywhere with you." Tae-yo's jaw tightened. His patience was running thin. "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." A shadow shifted outside. Tires crunched against the gravel. A second car had pulled up. Ada saw it first. Her grip on the knife tightened. "Reinforcements." Tae-yo smiled. "I didn't come alone." Tiffany gasped. "No." The front door burst open, and two men stepped inside. They were tall, built like soldiers, their expressions void of emotion. Timmy's heart pounded against her ribs. They were trapped. Ada's stance shifted, placing herself between Tiffany and the intruders. "You'll have to go through me first." Tae-yo chuckled darkly. "That won't be a problem." One of the men lunged. Ada moved faster. The fight erupted in an instant, chaos swallowing the room. Tiffany grabbed Timmy's hand, yanking her toward the back door. "Run!" Ada shouted. Timmy's legs finally obeyed her. She and Tiffany darted toward the back exit, the night air wrapping around them as they stumbled into the yard. The moon cast long shadows, but there was no time to stop and think. "Keep running," Tiffany urged, gripping Timmy's wrist tightly. Gunfire rang out behind them. Timmy let out a strangled cry as they dashed through the darkness, dodging the trees and bushes that lined the backyard. Her breath came in short gasps, her heart hammering so loud she could barely hear anything else. Another shot. The crunch of feet pounding against the dirt. They were being chased. "Faster, baby." Tiffany's voice was desperate now. Ahead, an old wooden fence loomed, its boards slightly rotted. There was no other way out. "We have to climb," Tiffany gasped, pushing Timmy toward it. Timmy hesitated, panic gripping her. Go." Timmy scrambled up first, her fingers slipping on the damp wood. She pulled herself over, her legs swinging wildly as she struggled to get to the other side. Tiffany was right behind her, her hands gripping the top of the fence when a rough hand grabbed her ankle. Tiffany screamed, kicking wildly, trying to break free. "Timmy, run," she shouted. Timmy froze, horror paralyzing her as she watched her mother being dragged back down. "No." Tae-yo's men yanked Tiffany to the ground, her screams piercing the night. Timmy wanted to jump back, to help, but fear held her in place. "Go." Tiffany pleaded again, her voice breaking. Find Ada. Timmy's entire body shook, tears spilling down her cheeks. Timmy now. With one last agonized look, Timmy turned and ran. Timmy sprinted through the darkness, her feet barely touching the ground. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop. The wind howled through the trees, masking her sobs as she pushed forward. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to get away. Her mother's screams echoed in her mind. The way Tayo's men had grabbed her, the terror in Tiffany's voice, it was all too much. Branches scratched at her arms as she pushed deeper into the woods. The ground beneath her was uneven, riddled with roots and rocks. Her lungs burned, her body ached, but she kept running. She had to find Ada. Somewhere in the distance, headlights flashed through the trees. She stumbled to a stop, crouching low, her breath coming in sharp gasps. A car?
Who was it?
Timmy's pulse pounded in her ears as she debated whether to run toward it or hide. Then a voice called out, "Timmy." Her heart leaped. She knew that voice.
Ada.
Relief and fear mixed inside her as she forced her legs to move again, stumbling toward the sound. She burst out of the trees, nearly collapsing into Ada's waiting arms. "I've got you," Ada whispered, steadying her. "Where's your mother's?" Timmy shook her head frantically. "They took her. Tayo's men, they got her." Ada's jaw clenched, her arms tightening around Timmy. "We'll get her back. I promise." She guided Timmy into the car, locking the doors behind them. The engine roared to life as Ada sped off into the night. Timmy curled into herself, shaking. The weight of what had just happened crushed her, making it hard to breathe. Tayo had her mother, and she had no idea if she would ever see her again. The ride was silent except for the sound of the car's tires against the road. Ada's grip on the wheel was tight, her jaw clenched in frustration. Timmy sat motionless, staring at the passing darkness outside the window, her body numb. They had taken her mother. She kept replaying the scene over and over in her head, her mother's desperate screams, the way those men had dragged her back. "I shouldn't have run," Timmy whispered. Ada's eyes flicked toward her for a second before returning to the road. "You did what you had to do. If you had stayed, they would have taken you too." Timmy swallowed hard, guilt clawing at her insides. "But she told me to find you. We have to go back." Ada exhaled sharply. "I know. And we will.
But we need to be smart about this.
Tayo is expecting us to panic. He'll be watching every road, waiting for us to make a mistake." Timmy clenched her fists. "We can't just leave her with them." Ada nodded. "We won't. But we need a plan." She took a sharp turn off the main road, leading them onto a narrow dirt path surrounded by dense trees. The car jostled over the uneven ground, but Ada kept going. Timmy's pulse quickened. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To someone who can help us." They drove in silence for another 15 minutes before the trees opened up to reveal a small, secluded house. The headlights illuminated an old wooden structure with a tin roof. A single lantern flickered near the porch. Ada parked the car and turned to Timmy. "Stay close to me." They stepped out into the cold night air. Ada knocked firmly on the door. A few seconds later, it creaked open, and a man appeared. He was tall, with graying hair and sharp, calculating eyes. He looked from Ada to Timmy, his expression unreadable. Ada spoke first. "We need your help." The man studied them for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." Timmy hesitated but followed Ada inside. The room smelled of smoke and aged wood. Papers were scattered on a wooden table, and maps covered the walls. This wasn't just a house, it was a place where plans were made. The man folded his arms. "Tell me everything." Ada nodded. "Tayo took Tiffany, and we need to get her back." The man's expression darkened. "Then we'd better move fast." Timmy sat stiffly on an old wooden chair while Ada and the man, who she learned was named Ji-dey, spoke in hushed voices. The room was dimly lit, the flickering lantern casting shadows across the walls. Her heart pounded as she listened intently, desperate for a plan. Ji-dey exhaled, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. "Tayo is dangerous. He has money connections." If we're going to get Tiffany back, we need to be 2 steps ahead of him. Ada nodded. We can't just rush in. He'll expect that. Ji-dey turned his sharp gaze to Timi. Did you see where they were taking hers? Timi swallowed hard, shaking her head.
No.
But they had 2 cars. One was black, the other gray. The black one had a dent on the side. Ji-day's expression hardened. That's good information. I know someone who can trace the cars. But we need to move fast. Ada leaned forward. What do you need? Ji-dey stood and pulled out an old phone. I'll make some calls. But if we do this, we need to be ready for anything. Tayo won't let her go easily. Timi's fists clenched. I don't care what it takes. We have to get her back. Ji-day's eyes softened slightly. We will. Ada placed a reassuring hand on Timi's shoulder. We'll rest for a few hours, then we'll act. You need your strength. But Timi knew she wouldn't sleep. Not until her mother was safe.
Thank you, friends, for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Suzy Space for more stories.